By now, you guys should know that drafting in a tiers format is the most comprehensive and understanding way to determine a player's value. This video is going to be our top 20 players. These are going to include forwards, wingers, centers, defensemen, and goaltenders as well. The categories that we are going to be focusing on are goals, assists, power play points, shots, and blocks for the players. And for goaltending, it's going to be a little bit tricky to rank, but there are only 2 goaltenders in this top 20 list, so we will be sure to place them accordingly. That being said, guys, this should be your #1 guide to the top 20 players in this year's upcoming fantasy hockey season. Let's get right into the video. All right, just a quick reminder, guys, before we get started, be sure to check out fantasypuck.net for all of your fantasy hockey needs, content. We have premium tools available to you for our Patreon users, as well as you can sign up for FPPL, which is our highly competitive, interactive fantasy hockey leagues. Be sure to check that out if you guys are interested for sure. We did a really overhaul of the website and brought it up to speed for you guys this year, so be sure to check that out if you guys are interested. Before we get started, guys, I just want to highlight that just because you see players in the B and C tier, that doesn't mean they're actually B and C tier players. Because this is a top 20 list, everyone is going to be split across the board here, including some players in the D tier. So just keep in mind the fact that, don't pay attention so much to the tier lettering themselves. Just think of them as individualized tiers where players sit within the top 20 overall players. So without further ado, let's get things started off here. I think it's pretty much across the board what we're looking at in terms of the S tier. We've got McDavid, McKinnon, Matthews, followed by Leon Draisaitl, and then we're going to add David Pastrnak and Nikita Kucherov to our S tier. And this is pretty much the consensus 7, and this is what you'll see a lot in terms of draft. These 7 players will go first before anybody else. It's very rare, at least that I've seen so far, where a player is going in place of any of these guys in the top 7. Your big 3 are right here. I almost consider them putting them in a tier of their own, but I think, you can make a justification for taking, Draisaitl over Matthews in some formats. You could take you make a justification of taking Kucherov at 3 even in some formats. So again, I think these are your consensus S tier 7. I'm going to do a better job of not just reading off some stats for you guys. We did that previously in the other 2 videos. I'm going to try and do my best to differentiate in terms of, why I pick some players over others. McDavid's the clear one. We looked at McKinnon before, but he's just very clearly the number 2. Like 405 shots with 51 goals, 140 points. And then on top of that, like the power play totals, like he's almost at 50 power play points on the year. And then 70 blocks on top of that is just ridiculous. He's very clearly the number 2 guy off the board, followed by Matthews. And then Draisaitl, I think, could be interchangeable. For me, it's Matthews at the 3, given that goal scoring upside. Nobody else can seemingly touch 70 goals in this league. Nobody at least has come close other than Matthews at 69 last season. Draisaitl, his floor is 110 points, elite on the power play. I think the big difference between Pasta and Draisaitl for me is the fact that Draisaitl can hit those 120 plus point totals. We haven't seen Pasta do it yet, but his floor does seem to be roughly the same as Draisaitl's, and he has scored 60 goals in the past. Draisaitl also has hit consistently over 50 goals on multiple occasions, but Pasta has a big advantage in the shot volume and in the hit category as well. So again, there is some justification, like I said, for these bottom 3. And then Nikita Kucherov being at the back, the only reason why he's there is because he lacks kind of that goal scoring upside that Pasta and Draisaitl have done consistently over their careers. Even though Kuch hit 44 last year, we haven't seen him hit 50 ever in his career. He's definitely more of a setup guy. Those 100 assists are ridiculous, and then obviously very elite on the power play. So if you, depending on your format, you could position these 7 in whichever way you like, but this is the consensus 7 and will be for the entire duration of fantasy hockey for this year. Now, this is where things get interesting, because you will see some overlap from previous videos where I've had players in S tier, but they're not going to be in S tier in this video, obviously, because we're looking at the top 20 overall. So there is a clear gap between the players in S tier and the players in A tier. We'll go over that in a second, but let's build out our A tier right here. We're going to start things off with Cale Makar, followed by Mikko Rantanen, followed by Matthew Tkachuk, and then we're going to go with Brady, Jack Hughes, and JT Miller. The big difference between the S tier and the A tier is just pure upside. You've got guys like Jack Hughes, who could be a top 5 scoring asset, but then hasn't shown that yet in the season. But when he's healthy, he has been a top 5 scoring asset and could easily jump to the S tier next season if he's able to stay healthy. But that's the biggest concern. So let's start things off with Cale Makar. Makar is very clearly the defenseman number 1 off the board, but I think the separation between him and the rest of the defensemen is he can consistently score over 21 goals, 70 assists, and then look at his power play totals on top of that, 39 power play points on top of the year, while managing to get over 230 shots and then 150 blocks last season as well. You'll see more defensemen, and I'll try to do my best when I bring those defensemen up on the tier list to give you reasonings to why Makar is so far ahead. But the fact that he's only played 77 games and he could absolutely shatter the 100-point mark is still possible for Cale Makar. He's so incredibly consistent with his goal scoring, with his shot volume, with his power play production. He is the D1 and should be the D1 off the board in every single format. He's gotten even better this season by bumping his block totals up to 150. So we'll go over that going into the next season. He has the most upside, in my opinion, still out of every single defenseman available. Going through the rest of our A tier, again, Mikko Rantanen, Matthew Tkachuk, these are the guys that are going to get you the 40-50 goal mark. Probably not for Tkachuk, but Rantanen's done it and can do it again, but are consistent 100-point players. And then they bring another element on top of that, you know, like Rantanen's power play points and the fact that he scores 50 to me very consistently bumps him slightly above Matthew Tkachuk, who is a consistent 40 goal guy with good shot volume on top of that. And then his hit total is really high. And he basically doubled his hit total the year before going into last season. So for me, that's kind of where I differentiate the two. The big difference between Matthew and Brady Tkachuk is the point totals. Brady obviously didn't have that great of a season last year. I'm putting Brady in this tier list as if he's going to be a point-a-game player for next season, because that's where I believe he's going to be. And then the biggest X factor for me is Jack Hughes. And if Jack Hughes can stay healthy, like I said, he is the player that I believe that could jump into the S tier right here. And then we'd probably have to restructure the entire tier beyond that as well. He's consistently over a point a game when he plays. And then the biggest reason why I think he could jump everybody in the A tier is that if he's healthy and he gets 110 plus points, he's going to have 40 goals and he's going to have a ludicrous shot volume. Like he's shown in the past consistently, his shots per 60 is one of the best in the National Hockey League. Not only the shot volume, but Jack Hughes can also hit those incredibly high ceiling for those power play point totals. If we go to his stats last season, in 62 games, this guy had 31 power play points in 62 games. He averaged a power play point every second game, which is huge in those formats. And like I said, when he's healthy, he will score over 40 goals and he will get you a ton of shots. Where he lacks is obviously the peripherals and the health concerns, which is why, in my opinion, he's towards the bottom of the A tier. And then rounding out our A tier, JT Miller, I think the difference between him and everybody else in the A tier is, in my opinion, he lacks a little bit of upside. I know he's hit around 100 points twice. I expect his goal totals to come down slightly from last year, as he shot 19%, where his career average is 15, essentially 14.9. So I'm expecting the goal totals to come down a little bit. And I think, you know, he's going to come back down to earth and be more of a point a game player around that 85 to 90 point range. And what makes him so special is you're obviously getting 200 plus hits out of him every single year and 50 plus blocks. So that's why he's deservingly in the A tier. I like Brady a little bit more because of the fact that they're such similar players. If they're both around a point a game, Brady has a little bit more goal scoring upside. He's regularly over that like 35 goal mark. And then the biggest thing with Brady is if they're both around a point a game, Brady's going to get you probably 150 more shots. And so that's the biggest thing with Miller. Like, obviously he's much better on the power play. So again, you could probably interchange the two of them. But for me, the edge goes to Brady if they're both around a point a game player, or even if Miller is in that 90 point range. I still would love the extra 150 in each of those peripheral stats from Brady Tkachuk. All right, guys, this is where it gets really interesting in the B tier. We're going to start things off with Artemi Panarin, followed by Kirill Kaprizov, then Roman Josi, then Evan Bouchard, Elias Pettersson, and finally Quinn Hughes. Starting off a B tier, we have two elite wingers in Artemi Panarin and Kirill Kaprizov. Both of these players have some concerns to them, which is why they're in a tier below. Artemi Panarin, my biggest concern with him is he going to continue to shoot the puck like he did last season? I don't think he's scoring anywhere close to 49 goals again next year. I think he could potentially be in that 35 range, maybe even 40 if he continues to shoot the puck like he did last year. But we've seen such a consistent nature from Panarin over the course of his career to where he's just this 90 to 95, maybe even upper 90s player where he gets you 25 to 30 goals and he gets you like 200 shots. But that all changed last year when he had 303 shots and a boatload of power play points on top of that. 44, one of the best in the National Hockey League last season. He'll never get you the hit and block peripherals that you want, but he's an absolute stud and a lock for seemingly 95 points, which is why I have him above Kirill Kaprizov. And the big reason why I had him above Kaprizov, and again, same situation as what I talked about in my wingers video, is Kaprizov just has not been able to stay healthy. And when you talk about safe players, like Panarin is very safe in comparison to Kaprizov, even though I like Kaprizov a little bit more than Panarin, just because I think he has more upside. It's hard to say that when Panarin just put down a 120 point season. But with Kaprizov he's got a really high shot volume. He consistently scores over 40 goals, it seems like, and could put together a 110 point season if he were to stay healthy, on top of having elite power play numbers. There's just a little bit more concern with him in terms of his injuries. And just like how there's concerns with Panarin, whether or not he can repeat the season he just had, that seems like such an incredible outlier. At least with Kaprizov, you know, you're getting that baseline shot volume and those 40 goals. You could probably interchange the two of those. I would be more than happy to get either of those guys at the end of round one, even at the turn. And you'll probably see me do that a lot in drafts this upcoming season. I'm likely taking Kaprizov over Panarin a lot of the time simply because of the upside. He's been well over a point a game player. They're both elite on the power play, but in my opinion, I think Kaprizov has the edge. I'm simply ranking Panarin above him because he's just a little bit safer in terms of how many games he plays over the course of a year. Next, we have a man that needs no introduction, the GOAT himself, Roman Josi. We absolutely love this guy here at Fantasy Puck. He is a unicorn in fantasy hockey just because of his crazy shot volumes. His shots per 60 last year actually took a hit, and he still managed to have 270 shots on the year with 23 goals, 85 points, over 30 power play points, 33 total on the year, and then 150 blocks he's a lock for, and around 50 hits every single season. Josi is such a stud. I think the biggest gap between him and Makar is just the fact that Makar's ceiling is so much higher now. Josi will continue to get you around point per game production with 20 goals and then this boatload of shot totals. But I think Makar just has a higher ceiling in terms of his point totals, as well as like the power play totals on top of that. We'll see what it's like in Nashville this year with them adding a bunch of shooters. And now that especially Makar has added, you know, those block totals getting up to roughly the same as Josi, I think he is deserving of being a tier above Josi. But moving on to Evan Bouchard, if you guys watched a Mike Tiers video, he actually had Bouchard in a tier below Josi and Quinn Hughes, and behind both of them and Rasmus Dahlin, who's not even a top 20 player for me in this video, but he's an absolute stud. Don't get me wrong, we're super on him this year. Why I think Bouchard is deserving of being ahead of Quinn Hughes and behind Roman Josi as the D3 off my board is simply because there's no reason to believe that he's not going to repeat a similar season that he just had. Not only is Bouchard a point-a-game player with 18 goals and over 30 power play points, but he also had 220 shots and 105 blocks and 71 hits. So you compare him to Quinn Hughes, where Quinn Hughes had, we'll get to him in a second, but 200 shots, 92 points on the year for Quinn, and then 17 goals. I would much rather take Evan Bouchard, who's going to get you similar power play point totals, get you an extra 20 shots, and then literally double his hit total and triple his block total. So there's just so much more that Bouchard offers, in my opinion, than a guy like Quinn Hughes. The shot volume is better. The hits are significantly better. The blocks are even more significantly better. And in my opinion, the reason why there's a little bit of hesitation, I think, on Mike's end for him, like repeating the season we just saw, was because Bouchard wasn't the power play one quarterback up until last season full time, even like I guess the playoffs prior to that. But the fact that he's shown now consistently, if you go down to his playoff stats as well, that he's been consistently over a point per game whenever he's been the power play one defenseman in Edmonton, there is no reason why this won't continue. He will continue to get the point totals that he's seeing now and hover around a point a game. There's even some arguments that you could make that he hasn't hit his ceiling yet and that he could potentially get into that 90 point threshold, in which case you could make an argument that he could potentially be the D1. I just think there's way too much upside still with Bouchard. I'm not concerned at all whether or not he's going to repeat the season. He's going to maintain around a point a game, whether it's slightly below or slightly above. He's going to be roughly around this point total simply because of the offense in front of him in Edmonton, and playing alongside Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on that power play just pushes his numbers so high. I think he's like, there's no reason as to why he shouldn't be above Quinn Hughes, in my opinion. All right, let's touch on Elias Pettersson before we get to Quinn Hughes. 82 games last year with 89 points. I think Petty is in a really good spot going into next season. I think he can get back to that 102 point season he had 2 years ago. I think he can honestly score 40. He could maybe even get higher than 40 goals on the season. The biggest concern with me is for Petty is the shot volume. It took a step back, honestly, last year as well. The power play totals are always going to be there for him. He's great on the power play. Him and JT Miller are just so good running the man advantage. But the biggest thing for why Pettersson is on this list over guys like Braden Point, William Nylander, and guys like Jason Robertson is the fact that he basically doubled his hit total last year and is consistently one of the highest blocking forwards in the National Hockey League on a year-to-year basis. So if you have a guy that can get you around 100 points, 40 goals, 250 shots, and then 125 hits and 70 blocks, in my opinion, that's worthy of being a top 20 player. And finally, rounding out our B tier, we have Quinn Hughes. This is no slander just because I'm taking Bouchard over him. You have to understand Quinn Hughes had such a great season last year. Very similar almost to Artemi Panarin in a sense, where he just decided he was going to shoot the puck significantly more, and it's paid dividends for him. 92 points on the year, 17 goals with 75 assists and 38 power play points. And then again, those peripherals are never going to be there, unfortunately, guys. But the biggest thing with Quinn Hughes is he's going to get you over a point a game production. I think he has a similar ceiling to Cale Makar. He could hit that 100-point total for sure, which is an argument for taking him over Bouchard, in my opinion. But again, he lacks those peripherals a little bit. I like the fact that he's shooting the puck more. Hopefully, he continues to do that going forward, and he will continue to be an absolute stud in fantasy hockey. And then finally, guys, finishing out our tier list, we have our two goaltenders in Igor Shesterkin and Connor Hellebuyck. These two are pretty interchangeable. It really depends on what you're looking for in your league settings. And just so we're clear, if you guys count like 4 goalie categories in your league, these guys can easily jump to the A tier. The only reason why I have them in the C tier is because typically we don't value goaltenders as high as others. But again, guys, it is completely dependent on your league settings. You know, whether you count just wins and saves or wins, save percentage, goals against, whatever the case is, having elite goaltenders can make or break your season. So please be aware that I'm not trying to undervalue these guys whatsoever. But let's get into it. So I have Igor slightly over Helly for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's just as consistent as Hellebuyck. He's never seen below a 912 save percentage. He did have a little bit of a rocky start in New York this year, but I think overall, I would much rather have him because he's on the Rangers and because he will consistently get you around, 36, 37 wins. Connor Hellebuyck is nothing to shy over either, just so we're clear. If we bring up his stats, Helly is one of the most consistent goaltenders in the National Hockey League, posting a 920 in back-to-back seasons with 37 wins in both of those, seeing 60 plus starts on the year. Helly is an absolute workhorse, one of, if not the most consistent goaltenders in the National Hockey League. It doesn't matter how his team is doing. He's always putting up good numbers in the save percentage and saves column, even goals against as well. I think Again, the biggest reason why I have Igor over him is I think the Jets took a little bit of a step back going into next season. It's close, but I think I would rather Shesterkin, even though the save percentage and goals against aren't as good as Helly's. I think that just the consistency in the wins is going to give you a bit of an edge going forward. Typically, wins are almost always a goalie category as well, but these two are honestly pretty interchangeable, again, depending on your league settings. So that's it, guys. This is the final list. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Again, just be wary of the goaltenders. They can drastically change up and down these tier lists depending on your league settings. So this is my top 20 list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments down below what you would change, who you would move around. Always love hearing your guys' opinions going forward. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Have yourselves a fantastic rest of the day.